Divorce is tough, and when real estate's involved, it can get even more complicated. Your home isn't just a building, it's memories, it's where your kids live or where you raise them, it's safety and security. And more often than not, it's one of the most valuable assets in a divorce. So in this video, we're going to break down how to handle real estate during a divorce in a way that's fair and efficient and informed, so you can make the best possible decisions for your future. This, if you're watching this, you're probably going through it right now, and I can really sympathize for that. I've done it myself, and it was probably the most impactful and emotionally charged time in my life, and it was very, very difficult. So that being said, let's jump in. Why is real estate so complicated in a divorce? And I think the simple answer we already touched on, the fact that a home isn't just a property, it's emotional. It represents years of memories. There were holidays there, birthdays, there were shared experiences. Your kids might live there, or maybe they grew up there, and deciding what to do with it is often just emotionally charged, and it brings up conflict. And of course, there's legal complexities as well, right? Different states have different laws. California is a community property state, and that means that most assets, including a home, are split 50-50 if they're acquired during the marriage. Now, if the home was bought before the marriage or it was inherited, it might be considered separate property, so that's a complete another issue. There's also, financial logistics. So you're going to need to find a professional valuation through probably an appraiser. You'll need to decide who's responsible for the mortgage and the upkeep during the transition. And there's probably going to be some potential tax implications like capital gains. So all of this equals a potentially emotionally charged issue to deal with. So the most common thing that people do when they're dealing with real estate in a divorce is simply just to sell the home and split the proceeds. And of course, there's pros to that in that it creates a clean financial break, and it avoids any ongoing complications. And it does that simply by converting the asset into cash, and then it's much easier to divide the proceeds. The cons, of course, are it's emotionally hard. You have to sell your home, and that's especially difficult if there's kids involved. Also, market conditions might play a factor in the timing and the price, might delay the divorce a bit. Not so much in California, but in other states where there's a more definite selling season that can cause a timing issue and maybe even a price issue. So those are things to consider. In either case, there's an emotional component that makes it a little difficult. So the second most common option that people use when they're dealing with real estate in a divorce is where one spouse buys out the other. And this is often done through a refinance. The buyout is based on current market value and equity. So typically that started with a professional appraiser. Then there has to be agreement made as to what the value is and the equity is. And then one spouse applies for a loan to pay off the other spouse and split the property that way. This is actually typically pretty good, pros-wise, because it keeps one spouse in the home, which is really good if there's kids that live there for their stability. And then, of course, there's no need to sell. The cons, of course, are that refinancing can be really difficult, especially on one income. You've got to agree on the fair value and equity distribution. And in any case, this actually works pretty good if one person is financially able to take over the home, but it has to be handled pretty carefully. The third most common thing that people do when they're dividing real estate in a divorce is to actually just continue ownership, so to actually co-own the home after the divorce. And so this works good for some couples when they can agree to delay selling. Usually it's just done for the sake of the children, right? So the thing that really is hard to do here is that it really requires a very clear and concise agreement and good communication. The pros, obviously, are the children stay in the same home, in the same school, and potentially it might be good if you need the home to appreciate before selling it. So that might be a good option there as well. The cons, obviously, are you remain financially tied to one another, and of course that can cause some issue. It also might cause one spouse not to be able to purchase a home because they're financially tied to that house still and they can't qualify for both. So this is typically a less attractive option for a lot of people, but for some, it's really the best option, something you need to talk about. Whatever route you decide to take, having a fair and a smooth process is usually a good goal to have. Communication is really everything. So you want to try to keep communication focused on facts and keep emotions completely out of it if possible. You want to work with a mediator or a divorce attorney only if needed. Really going back to communication one to another, if that's possible, that is really the best option. Mediators and divorce attorneys can sometimes muddy the water and they can become very, very expensive very quickly. So try to open up the lines of communication if at all possible. Now, of course, professional guidance is key. You want a neutral real estate agent who has experience in divorce sales. That can be a huge asset. Attorneys also have their place in drawing up documents, as well as financial advisors to make sure that everything is fair and legally sound. Now, also, of course, timing matters. So selling in a strong market can benefit both parties. Waiting too long can increase tension and financial strain. So finding an easy medium in there is beneficial. Each situation obviously is unique, and sometimes timing plays a bigger role than people expect. So there's obviously some common pitfalls that people can get into. I think the first one is not having a clear plan. You know what, having a strategy or a plan, things have a tendency to drag out, they cost more. Sometimes people can get positional or things can happen where there's more contention. And so having a clear plan and goals is really helpful to get started. And then I think the second pitfall is letting emotions drive your financial decisions. People sometimes decide they want to hold on to a house for the wrong reasons. You know, a lot of times there is a lot of sentimental value in the house, and that's why they end up trying to hold on. But the truth is that might hurt their long-term financial future, and you really ought to be thinking from a less emotional standpoint when you make those financial decisions. And then the third, I think, is mispricing the home. Overpricing a lot of times delays the sale. And undervaluing, of course, is also a problem. You can lose money, so you don't want to do either. So my recommendation would be to start with a professional market analysis, and probably a professional appraisal would be a good place to start, so there's a clear agreement between both parties of what the value actually is. Here's some final thoughts on what to do next. If you're going through a divorce and you're dealing with real estate questions, know that you're not alone. This is one of the biggest financial decisions you'll make, and it's okay to ask for help. Whether you plan to sell or buy out your spouse or explore some other option, the most important thing is to have a clear plan, good advice, and fairness on both sides. You know, on a personal note, my ex-wife and I spent over $100,000 on attorney fees, and we never came up with an agreement. As a matter of fact, we spent all our cash, had to fire our attorneys, and were forced into mediation. We went to mediation and still couldn't agree with the mediator. We ended up outside in the hallway on a break, and we ended up talking and letting down our pride and just realizing that we had to come to an agreement. And we hammered out an agreement in 15 minutes after all that. If you have questions and you need help figuring out what to do with your home, I'm always available for a confidential conversation. No pressure, no sales pitch, just understanding your options. Thanks very much. If you have similar experiences, please share them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Love to chat on the phone if you want to reach out. Like and subscribe, and thank you very much. Best of luck to you.